Hey, what's going on, Renaissance Lifers? Welcome back to Renaissance Life TV. On today's show, we're talking about what to do if your partner, spouse, husband, boyfriend is afraid of having a home birth. Okay guys, so welcome back. If you're new to Renaissance Life TV, Renaissance Life TV is a place for personal growth and success with a different perspective on navigating life and relationships. We bring you a new video every single week on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. So this video really is a sequel or an addition to the video that I did on home birth tips for dads. I just want to say thank you so much. I've gotten such great feedback with that video. People are consistently watching it and leaving me comments and reviews. And mainly I'm hearing from mothers who are due to have a home birth or thinking about a home birth or considering having a home birth. So thank you so much for your support. And that's really the reason why I made this video. From the comments of that video, I kind of was reading some of the things that were concerning for moms to be who were considering having a home birth. And one of the things that I saw a few times was this idea of having, oftentimes a husband or a boyfriend who was not supportive of having a home birth. And so this kind of really triggered something in my mind because over the years, my wife and I have had so many couple friends of ours, who are married or who are boyfriend and girlfriend, etc. And the woman who was set to have the baby and considering having a home birth or really desiring a home birth, and then the man oftentimes in these situations was hesitant about having a home birth or really did not want to have a home birth. So what I'm hoping to do in this video today is to unpack and deconstruct some of the fear behind having a home birth and kind of talk through maybe some of the reasons on both sides, so that way maybe we can have some more understanding and hopefully help couples reach a place where they can make a mutual decision and there can be support around the table. Okay, so let's get right into it. What do you do if your partner is scared of having a home birth? And so I think the first thing that I'll say here is recognize that if your partner is hesitant about having a home birth, a lot of times this stems from fear. All of us have different responses to fear, and I can speak for men generally. When we have fear about something, we tend to want to control or resist that thing. So if it's an area that's out of our control or something that is scary, we'll oftentimes just want to resist 100%. So one of the reasons why I find that, husbands and boyfriends are often resistant to having a home birth is because of the fear of the unknown. When you go into the history of it, you'll see that at least in recent times in the US, hospital births have become the norm, right? It's very expected. It's what people are comfortable with because it's what happens all the time. That is not the case in many other countries around the world, including most of the well-developed countries. So before I even get into any of the statistics or things that you should be thinking about as a partner who has the fear about having a home birth is, first of all, I want to say that I get it. I've been there. I know what it feels like to have your wife or your partner be pregnant and be considering having a home birth when that is not the norm. There's an inherent fear behind it. What if something goes wrong? How are we going to take care of it? How are we going to get help if there's an emergency? And of course, the hospital sells safety. It sells that security or a sort of guarantee that nothing will go wrong. And, I'll go into that and, how true that is. And obviously I have a bias because I think the statistics and the vast evidence shows that that is not the case. But nevertheless, that perception is at least there. And I think it's a reasonable perception because that's what everybody kind of does right now. So I think as the woman, one thing to keep in mind is that while home birth is scary for a mom, it's also scary for a dad. And oftentimes as men anyway, we don't really articulate that very well or express that. And the way of expressing that oftentimes is trying to control the situation. Ultimately, I want to be really respectful in this video about the debate between home birth and hospital birth. I often see people who want to have a hospital birth down and talk bad about people who want a home birth, even though oftentimes people who want to have a home birth are not there trying to convert everybody to having a home birth. They just want that option, and they want to be able to have that ability, and they believe that that's the best choice for them. So I think that's really important. I think a home birth is not for everyone. You know whether you want to do that or not. So if it's something for you, generally speaking, I find that women have done the research. And so this is one thing I will say to the dads, and I will say this to the moms as well. Oftentimes when I've had conversations with couples or just the man, man to man, and I'm hearing what the concerns are about the home birth, they just don't want it. They just don't like it. But oftentimes they don't have the facts. They just don't have the facts. They haven't done the research. So you have on one side the mom doing all this research, trying to figure out, learning about the system, learning the ins and outs about a hospital birth, what the statistics, what the pros and cons are, and coming to a decision that this is the best decision for her and the baby. And then you have the man oftentimes on the other side just saying, yeah, it's not happening, I don't want it. So I think that can be a really difficult thing to deal with. And, obviously every relationship is different and every relationship is unique. So, some of this I think goes back to relationship dynamics. Is the decision going to be one that's mutual, one that's going to be in the best interest of the person who's going to be most impacted, which in this case is going to be the mom. One thing that you can do as a mom or a mom-to-be is to help to inform the dad. Give him information, have him read things. And I'll be honest, when we were first considering it, I was pretty okay with the idea, but I really wasn't interested in reading all this information about it. But my wife did a really good job of kind of breaking down the facts for me and laying it out on the table. And she talked about it all day ad nauseum. So I couldn't help but start to take in some of the things. And one of the things we did really early on in our marriage, before we even had kids, was we watched the documentary, The Business of Being Born. So this was kind of already in our minds, and that really blew our minds. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I believe it's on Netflix, and you probably can even see it on YouTube. But it's called The Business of Being Born. And it talks about both sides in interviews, midwives, OBGYNs in New York and all these places. And you really get an inside look, and these doctors are telling you, listen, we really don't have much of a choice. We really wouldn't do it this way, but this is the way the system is rigged. So you can watch the documentary, but to really keep it short and to the point, the hospital is a business. And you should never forget that. Businesses ultimately are concerned with their bottom line. That is what they do. How much money can they make? And it doesn't help a hospital, a business that is a hospital, ultimately to have patients sitting in the hospital for a very long time. The way they make money is to have patients rotating in and out. And so there's typically a timeline and pressure to get birthing and pregnant moms out of the hospital as quickly as possible and get new moms in there, because that's how they bill, that's how they get more insurance, and that's how they make their money and stay profitable. So there are a lot of pressures for having a woman have a baby as soon as possible. So one of the things they encourage is, of course, waiting till the very last minute when a woman is mostly dilated, at least 5, 6, 7 centimeters before she comes to the hospital, so that way she's progressed. But then the other thing is, because doctors have a timeline, and you'll hear this in the documentary where they say they have the pressure to have certain number of women come in and out at a certain time. So intervention begets intervention. What that means is when you start to get involved, that requires more involvement. And so what typically happens is when you have a woman come in who's laboring, the doctor will often tell the nurses, and nurses will tell you this, we need this baby out by 10 p.m., whatever the time might be, whatever the required time is. And so if the woman is not progressing as quickly as they want to, they need to progress that pregnancy. And if you know anything about pregnancies or labors, labor can take any amount of time. It could be 12 hours, it could be 36 hours, it could be anything, but they can't wait that long. And so they typically give the woman what's called Pitocin. So it's a drug. And what Pitocin does is it progresses the labor. It moves the labor. And how it does that is by creating artificial contractions. Just like the body would normally do gradual contractions to bring the baby down the birth canal, Pitocin brings on contractions instantly, very hard, all at once, where it's very painful and very stressful for the baby as well. So when that happens, that pain is not the normal pain that comes through the contractions that are gradual through a normal birth. And usually the most natural response to having those type of contractions, which I call artificial contractions, forcing your body to have contractions in that way, is to request an epidural. And who wouldn't? Because it's just so abnormally painful. And so once you request an epidural, what an epidural does is they stick a needle into your spine. And of course, we can talk about the ramifications of that. But sticking the needle in the spine, numbing the bottom of the body. And so the woman can't feel the pain, which is what you need in order to be able to push a baby out. Just like when you go to the bathroom and you want to do number 2, if you don't have the pain, you don't have the impetus to actually push it out. When the woman is not feeling pain and can't push, they're constantly telling the woman, we need this baby to come out. You need to get this baby out. You need to push. She's in a position that is not conducive to really pushing a baby out, which is another thing, right? With gravity versus laying on your back. As a result of all this intervention, including the unnatural contractions, the baby's heart rate goes really fast, then the baby's heart rate slows, and they're in the birth canal during that time. So the next thing the doctors will typically say is, the baby's heart rate is dropping, we gotta take this baby out to save this baby, to protect this baby. So intervention begets intervention. So what do they have to do? A C-section. And this story is really a broken record. It's really amazing to hear how many people have this same story, been given Pitocin, say that we need to progress. You're not progressing as you should be, whatever that means. We need to progress it. Then, of course, because we've progressed it and now you have an epidural and can't push, now we need to take this baby out by force. And this happens to so many people. And so this is sort of the thing that women who want to have a home birth are trying to avoid. Trying to take that process back and put it back in the hands of the mother to do birth on her own terms. To take the control and put it back in the mother's hands where it belongs, rather than a system which dictates to a woman how she should have a birth, when she should have a birth, and dictates to her what she should be doing out of pressure, duress, stress, to make those type of decisions under those conditions. And of course, ultimately, I will say that what we want out of a labor, out of a delivery, is a healthy baby. So you're going to be happy having a healthy baby at the end of the day. But, I think the reality is going through that sort of a process has a lot of ramifications. To talk about, healing, the difficulty with bonding with the child, breastfeeding, those different things that come because of having a cesarean versus a natural birth, where my wife, for instance, we had the birth and she was on her feet, moving, took a shower right after she pushed the baby out. We got something to eat. We were home that same night. And in our last 2 births, we were at home. We did home births. So we were pretty much back to normal. So those are some of the considerations why I believe, many women want to have home births and have the birth on their terms. So if you're dealing with, a spouse, a partner, a husband who is just not supportive, I would say deal with the fear. Understand that this is coming from a place of fear and try to address those fears in hopefully trying to help bring that partner around. Also talk about, where you're coming from, what this means to you, and what the birth process looks like for you. In particular, what would happen if you have the birth in the hospital and that sort of an experience. And, we haven't even mentioned, the infant mortality rate and what happens in these hospitals as compared to in the US as compared to other developed countries who predominantly use midwives and actually use hospitals for emergencies, right? So, that goes into talking about doctors typically being trained to look for and spot emergencies. Everything is typically an emergency because that's what they're trained to do. They really don't specialize in delivering babies, or what I should say, assisting mothers in actually delivering babies. They're trained in surgery. And so when you're trained in something and that's what you do, you'd almost be twiddling your thumbs if all you did was watch mothers deliver babies. But I believe, anyway, that a lot of times what they need is to do something, and so that's what causes them to intervene so often. Whereas a home birth, or even a birth in a birth center, typically what you're doing is assisting the mother in having the baby. And midwives, they specialize in helping mothers birth. They understand the body. It's amazing to see the difference in what they know about birthing and how to even prevent emergencies in the first place, right? What to do if you do have an emergency. And understanding, of course, if I didn't say it already, that if you're having a home birth or a birth center birth, you have to be a low risk pregnancy to begin with, which most people, the vast majority of people, are low risk. So that way you shouldn't have any issues. But when you compare that most people are low risk, but then 70% of births in the hospital having to be done by cesarean, it just does not match up. It doesn't equate, because it'd be essentially all those people are high risk because they're gonna have high risk labors. And so suddenly you need to intervene and cut them open and take the baby out by force. I mean, those are some of the things. Hopefully, if you're a guy watching this, hopefully this was at least a hint of some of the things that go into play, whether it's at the hospital, whether it's at home. And if you're a mom or a mother to be, who's pregnant and who's going to have a home birth, hopefully this was helpful to give you some ideas of how to sort of start to break down some of the walls and barriers and apprehensions about having a home birth to your partner. If you're a mom who's had, a successful home birth or a supportive birth partner, feel free, please leave in the comment section below what helped you, what helped to bring them around if they weren't supportive at the beginning, versus at the end, and share some of those things. I know for me, if I didn't say it already, I had some hesitations up front, but my wife really breaking down the information over time really helped me to fully come around and be supportive. So if you like this type of content, please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. I'm wishing you all ultimately the best birth experience possible. And I hope that it'll be a supportive experience all the way around. And until next time, I'm wishing you health and happiness. Cheers.